Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that Colonel William Prescott quietly led 1,200 colonial soldiers under the cover of darkness onto Breed's Hill overlooking Boston and ordered them to build defenses, which included cannons and fortifications for the British to see in the morning above them? Learn why Colonel Prescott gave the legendary command, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," to help his soldiers conserve precious ammunition and improve their aim. Discover that even though the British eventually captured the hill, the Patriots proved they could stand against one of the world's strongest armies and change the course of the Revolutionary War.
So imagine going to sleep, right?
Sure.
You are the unquestioned military superpower of the world. And you wake up to find that a literal fortress has been built in your backyard.
Overnight.
Completely silently, too.
Yeah, completely silently. I mean, that is exactly what happened to the British Army occupying Boston. This is the morning of June 17, 1775. You are the dominant empire on the globe. You control the city. You command the harbor. You dictate the narrative.
You've got a total monopoly on power.
Exactly. Then the sun comes up, you look across the water, and you see cannons. Just earthen walls and cannons dug into a hill directly above your position, threatening your entire fleet.
It's just a profound strategic shock. You go to bed feeling completely secure, and you wake up staring down an entrenched enemy that seemingly materialized out of thin air.
Yeah, and that unbelievable morning surprise is really the starting point for our deep dive today.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at excerpts from the historical text, The Defiance at Breed's Hill, to explore the anatomy of a legendary underdog story.
Right, and we aren't here just to recite a textbook timeline for you.
No, definitely not. We are looking at the source material to extract the underlying mechanics of this whole confrontation, because we want to help you understand the strategic patience, the rigorous preparation, and the brutal tactical calculus that goes into decision-making under immense pressure.
Because the specific methods these colonists used to pull this off and the mathematical reality of what happened in the hours that followed, it really offers a masterclass in how a severely outmatched group can systematically dismantle a superior opponent.
Okay, let's unpack this. The first thing the source material clarifies is a pretty big geographical misconception. Everyone knows the monuments and the popular history surrounding the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Sure, it's iconic.
But the fighting didn't actually happen there. The colonists bypassed Bunker Hill entirely and set up on a smaller, lower elevation right on the Charlestown Peninsula overlooking Boston, a place called Breed's Hill.
What's fascinating here is why that specific detail matters tactically. Breed's Hill was closer to the water and much closer to the British positions.
So they didn't just pick a high point to hide behind.
Exactly. They purposely chose a location that was wildly provocative. And we really have to contextualize who is making this move. The source material emphasizes that Massachusetts towns only began forming these militia companies in 1774.
Wow, so just the year before.
Right. Colonel William Prescott is leading about 1,200 men of the 7th Continental Regiment, but the text defines them as poorly organized and largely untrained.
So these aren't professional combat engineers. We're talking about, farmers, mechanics, and shopkeepers who have been drilling in town squares for maybe a year.
Precisely. I mean, the British viewed them as a disorganized, chaotic mob. Yet this supposedly untrained group executes a deliberate, highly coordinated maneuver right under the guns of the Royal Navy.
I want to look at the mechanics of how they actually set this trap, because the logistics of the night before June 16 are just staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
Prescott leads these 1,200 men onto the peninsula in the dark. And the text notes they have only picks and shovels, basic agricultural and manual labor tools.
No heavy machinery, obviously.
Right. It's like the ultimate high-stakes all-nighter. Imagine waking up to find your neighbor has silently built a fortress overlooking your backyard while you slept. They spend the entire night erecting a sophisticated earthen redoubt on Breed's Hill, and they have to do it in near total silence.
Which is incredibly difficult. They're moving thousands of tons of dirt by hand. But it's not just the physical labor, it's the psychological discipline.
Because if they make a sound.
Exactly. To maintain silence while doing backbreaking work in the dark, knowing that a single dropped shovel or a loud conversation could bring a naval bombardment right down on your head that requires a level of cohesion that completely contradicted the British assumption of them being just a rabble.
It totally changes the physics of the battlefield before the battle even starts. By morning, they aren't an offensive mob rushing the British lines. They've turned themselves into a static, defensive fortification.
They seize the initiative. When the British command wakes up, they don't see protesters. They see Colonel Prescott and his militiamen entrenched, dug in, and commanding the high ground. The colonists fundamentally altered the rules of engagement while the British were sleeping.
Which forces the British commander, Major General William Howe, to figure out how to dismantle this massive provocation. And this is where the text details a decision that, honestly, requires some scrutiny.
It really does.
Early that afternoon, Howe loads his British soldiers onto 28 barges. He ferries them across the Charles River to disembark and storm the hill. But the source material explicitly notes a glaring alternative here.
Right, his naval advantage.
Exactly. Howe had total naval superiority. He could have easily used his ships to surround the peninsula.
Yeah, the Charlestown Peninsula was connected to the mainland by a very narrow neck. Howe's fleet controlled the water on all sides.
Wait, I have to push back on Howe's decision-making here. Howe is a professional, seasoned military commander, right?
Oh, very much so.
So why choose to load thousands of men onto 28 barges, ferry them across a tidal river, and march them uphill into a fortified position? Why not just park the warships around that narrow neck, cut off their supply lines, and starve them out?
It's the logical question.
Is the argument really that he marched his troops into a meat grinder purely out of ego? Or was there an actual tactical reason he dismissed the naval blockade?
It's a vital question. To understand Howe's decision, we really have to look at 18th century European military doctrine. It wasn't just blind ego. Howe was operating on a completely different mental model of warfare.
How so?
Well, in the European theater, wars were fought using linear tactics. Armies marched in formation, and the sheer discipline and visual intimidation of a professional army were often enough to break the resolve of lesser-trained troops.
Oh, I see. So he is treating this not as a tactical siege, but as a psychological demonstration.
Exactly. Howe's operating system told him that a frontal assault by the finest infantry in the world, with their gleaming bayonets, perfect formations, and relentless drumbeats, would just shatter the colonists' nerve.
Except they'd panic.
He fundamentally believed the colonists would take one look at the advancing British line and run. He ignored the tactical reality of the terrain and his naval advantage because his doctrine dictated that rebellious subjects needed to be broken through a show of overwhelming force.
You know, think about how often that happens today. Like when someone relies on their legacy status or their title to solve a problem rather than looking at the actual data right in front of them.
Yeah, it's a classic trap.
Howe fell into the trap of believing his reputation would do the heavy lifting. And by doing so, he plays right into Prescott's hands. He surrenders his naval advantage and commits to the hardest possible path, a slow uphill march against an entrenched enemy carrying like 60 pounds of gear in the summer heat.
And that brings us to the actual moment of contact, which requires us to look closely at the Patriots' response as this incredibly intimidating force begins its ascent.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We've all heard the legendary order from Colonel Prescott, right? Do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes.
Everyone knows that line.
Right. And in popular culture, it's usually framed as this dramatic statement of bravery. But the source material strips away the romance and reveals that this was actually a strict mathematical and logistical calculation.
And it was born of absolute necessity. The Patriots had incredibly limited supply lines. The powder and shot in their pouches was effectively all they had for the entire battle.
Wow, so no reinforcements coming with extra ammo?
None. Plus, we have to look at the weapons themselves. These are smoothbore muskets. They don't have rifling inside the barrel to spin the bullet and stabilize its flight.
So they're basically wildly inaccurate at a distance.
Exactly. They are notoriously inaccurate. If they start firing when the British are 100 yards down the hill, they're just going to waste their limited powder hitting the dirt.
And there's the smoke issue too, right?
Oh, a massive issue. 18th century black powder creates thick, blinding white smoke. After the first volley, the battlefield is going to be completely obscured. You essentially get one clear look at your enemy.
So Prescott calculates that to maximize his lethal yield, he has to wait until the British are a mere 15 paces away. 15 paces. That is roughly 45 feet.
It's incredibly close.
I mean, it's like holding a winning poker hand and letting your opponent keep betting and betting until the very last second. Or waiting for the absolute perfect pitch in baseball before swinging. But the nerve that takes, if Howe's men are trudging uphill, how long does that standoff actually last in real time?
It's not a quick sprint. It's a slow, agonizing approach. We're talking minutes of intense psychological pressure. You have professional soldiers marching toward you, drums beating, bayonets fixed.
Right.
Your every human instinct is screaming at you to shoot or run.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's basically a physics problem. Think of the earthen redoubt like a dam holding back a massive reservoir of water.
That's a great way to put it.
If you panic and release the water too early, the pressure dissipates over a wide area and just gets the ground wet. But if you hold that water back, letting the pressure build and build until the absolute final second and then release it all at once through a narrow channel, you create a devastating concentrated kinetic wall.
And Prescott was treating the limited ammunition of his men exactly like that dam. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the profound discipline required to hold that dam is the bridge between being a poorly organized militia and a highly lethal force.
Because it neutralized the British advantage.
Completely. Prescott recognized his men couldn't win a prolonged long-distance shooting match against British regulars. By forcing them to wait until the enemy was 45 feet away, he engineered a situation where their lack of marksmanship training simply didn't matter. He turned their biggest weaknesses, poor accuracy and low ammunition, into a devastating point-blank advantage.
Let's break down the execution of that tactic, because releasing that kinetic wall at 15 paces leads directly into the brutal waves of combat that defined that afternoon. The text outlines 3 distinct assaults by the British.
Right, and the first wave demonstrates the sheer shock of Prescott's tactical discipline. The British march up the hill, fully expecting the colonists to just break and run.
But they don't.
They don't. The British hit that invisible 45-foot line, and the Patriots unleash their coordinated firepower.
The result is catastrophic. Scores of British troops are killed or wounded instantly. The smoothbore muskets, which are useless at a distance, act like shotguns at 15 paces.
Yeah, the British line completely shatters, and the survivors are forced to retreat back down the hill.
Which must have been mind-blowing for the British command.
The psychological shock in that moment is profound. Their foundational assumption that the sheer sight of the Empire would scatter the militia, it just evaporates in a cloud of black powder.
But Howe's doctrine won't let him quit. So he regroups his men at the bottom of the hill. He orders a second wave. Now the British troops have to march up that same hill, but this time they're stepping over the bodies of their own men.
The element of intimidation is completely gone.
Right. They know exactly what is waiting for them at the top.
And again, the Patriots hold their discipline. They wait for the British to close the distance, and they unleash a second devastating volley. The 7th Continental Regiment breaks the British line a second time.
That's unbelievable. 2 complete repulses of the finest military on Earth by a group of men who were mechanics and farmers just months prior.
It's incredible. But the Patriots are operating on a finite clock, and that clock is determined entirely by their powder horns.
Yeah.
When Howe orders the third wave, the tactical reality on the hill has changed.
Because they're basically out of ammo.
Exactly. The attackers push up the hill one final time. By now, the Patriots are perilously low on ammunition. They no longer have the massed firepower required to create that kinetic wall at 15 paces. The British breach the earthen defenses, and the battle devolves into fierce, brutal, hand-to-hand combat.
The text notes that because the Patriots lacked bayonets, they were literally fighting with rocks and the heavy wooden stocks of their muskets. Ultimately, the lack of ammunition dictates the outcome. The Patriots are overrun and forced to retreat. The British eventually take the physical ground of Breed's Hill.
They capture the geographical objective, but evaluating a conflict solely by who stands on the dirt at the end of the day completely misses the broader strategic picture here.
Right.
The true story of this battle, and the reason it remains a masterclass in asymmetric warfare, is told in the casualty numbers.
And the text provides staggering exact figures for this. Yes, the British planted their flag on the hill, but they paid for that dirt with 1,054 casualties. That breaks down to 226 British soldiers killed and 828 wounded.
To contextualize those numbers, this was the highest loss suffered by the British in any single battle during the entirety of the war. General Howe lost a massive percentage of his officer corps in a single afternoon.
Comparatively, the American losses were over 100 killed and more than 300 wounded. It is a steep and tragic toll for the Patriots, no doubt, but a fraction of the devastating damage they inflicted on an overwhelming force. So what does this all mean? The British technically won the battle, but at what cost?
Well, this creates what military historians call a Pyrrhic victory. A win so costly it essentially equates to a defeat. But more importantly, it triggers a massive psychological shift. The British won the physical terrain, but they lost the psychological war.
Because the inexperienced Patriot forces proved they could inflict devastating casualties.
Exactly. Against an enemy that previously believed itself invincible.
It completely reframed the colonists' understanding of their own capabilities. Because of this, despite losing the physical ground, the Patriots gained immense confidence and courage to go forward in the war. They walked off that hill knowing they had the capacity to bleed the British Army dry. It was a tactical defeat that served as a massive strategic and psychological catalyst.
And this is where the source material bridges the gap between 18th century warfare and modern strategic thinking. The mechanics of what happened on Breed's Hill ask us to evaluate how we handle disparity and pressure in our own environments.
Yeah, I want you to think about the times you were faced with a situation where you feel outmatched or overwhelmed. Someone sends a highly critical email, and your immediate instinct is to fire back a response to defend your territory.
Right, just instantly reacting.
Or a competitor launches a massive new initiative, and your team's impulse is to scramble, bypass your planning phases, and rush something out the door just to prove you are still in the fight.
That impulse is driven by the exact same operating system General Howe used. The desire to act immediately, to rely on noise and motion to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Howe saw the hill fortified and immediately put 28 barges in the water to attack it head-on, completely ignoring his structural advantages. But true strategic leverage often requires the exact opposite approach.
It requires doing the quiet, unglamorous work in the dark. Moving the dirt, building the readout, preparing your position so thoroughly that you change the physics of the engagement before the confrontation even begins.
And once you have prepared, it requires immense restraint, waiting for the right moment. I mean, the hardest part of the battle wasn't digging the dirt. It was standing behind it and doing absolutely nothing while an intimidating force marched toward them.
So true.
In our own challenges, true strategic advantage often comes not from striking first, but from meticulous preparation followed by immense restraint. Holding our fire until we can maximize our impact, waiting for the whites of their eyes in our own professional or personal challenges, ensures that when we do act, we land with devastating effect.
So how do you benefit from preparing and then waiting before you act? Does it make a difference in your decisions and the outcome of how you choose to act? It's really about letting a situation develop until the variables are perfectly aligned for your success, rather than exhausting your energy on a premature emotional reaction.
There is also a profound lesson here about how we label our outcomes. At the end of the day, on June 17, the Patriots lost the hill and retreated. On a ledger, that is recorded as a failure.
Right.
But we just detailed how that specific temporary setback was the exact mechanism that provided the confidence, the insight, and the courage necessary to endure and win an entire war.
It forces you to look at your own temporary setbacks through a completely different lens. Since an absolute tactical loss on Breed's Hill actually gave the Patriots the courage necessary to endure and win a war, how often do we prematurely label our own temporary setbacks as failures?
All the time.
When in reality, the discipline you learned, the weaknesses you exposed in the competition, and the resilience you built during that process might be the exact proving ground you needed for ultimate success. The next time you wake up to a seemingly insurmountable disruption to your plans, remember the tactical restraint on Breed's Hill. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to dig in, ignore the noise, and trust the preparation you did in the dark.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.